Perhaps you've heard of powerful queens, the ones who changed the course of history. But tonight, we meet a woman both greater and simpler than legend. She was Victoria, ruler of an empire, yet prisoner of her own heart. Behind the black gowns and solemn portraits was a soul longing to be touched, to be seen, to be loved. She gave her heart to Albert, mourned him in darkness, and found light again in the most unexpected places. This is not a story of power, but of yearning. So close your eyes and listen to the heartbeat of Victoria, the queen who needed to be loved. The night is still. The ink bleeds softly across the page. Somewhere in Windsor Castle, a solitary figure sits beneath the flicker of candlelight, her black gown heavy with memory, her pen trembling with the weight of confession. The sound of scratching quill fills the silence, a rhythm only grief could compose. They called her the symbol of morality, the narrator whispers, but her heart told another story. Outside, the empire sleeps under her name, Victorian England, an age synonymous with restraint, duty, and propriety. Yet the woman at its center, Queen Victoria herself, was anything but restrained. Beneath the corseted image of a monarch in mourning lived a soul ablaze with passion and contradiction. She ruled an empire built on order, while her own heart was a storm she could never tame. Historians often describe her as the matron in black, the eternal widow of Windsor, the emblem of prudence. But if one dares to turn the fragile pages of her journals, the thousands upon thousands of words she poured into them across 7 decades, a different voice emerges. It is not the voice of a saint, nor of a sovereign untouched by longing. It is the voice of a woman who loved fiercely, who feared abandonment, who craved touch more than ceremony. Dr. Jane Ridley, one of Victoria's most devoted biographers, once said, "Her diaries are not the records of a monarch, but the heartbeat of a woman trapped between desire and duty. Within those pages lies the truth she never spoke aloud, the truth her children tried to erase, her courtiers tried to silence, and history tried to forget. The truth that behind the veil of empire stood a woman who wanted nothing more than to be loved." The irony was cruel. The century she defined demanded emotional restraint, moral rectitude, and silence. But Victoria's own life defied every rule. She could be furious, sensual, jealous, and tender all within a single day. One courtier wrote that Her Majesty loved with the same intensity she ruled with no moderation at all. And that intensity, for better or worse, shaped both her empire and her soul. Tonight, we open the hidden diary of that soul. We trace the ink of her most private confessions, letters to lovers, laments to ghosts, the confessions of a woman torn between throne and heart. Who was the real Victoria, the Empress of Restraint? Or the woman who loved too deeply? Was she a ruler of nations, or a prisoner of her own emotions? As the candle burns lower, her hand hesitates. The quill rests for a moment, then moves again, slower now, almost like a heartbeat on paper. Her handwriting falters, as if the words themselves hurt to be born. The music fades to silence. Then, from the diary itself, her own voice, faint, trembling, eternal whispers across time, I cannot exist without love. The corridors of Kensington Palace were long, cold, and quiet. No laughter echoed through them. No fatherly footsteps, no mother's song. Only the click of a governess's heels and the faint rustle of a child's skirts against the polished floor. In one of the upper rooms, a little girl sat by the window, tracing shapes in the condensation of a winter morning. That girl was Victoria Small, watchful, and already learning how silence can be both a refuge and a prison. She was born in May of 1819, the daughter of the Duke and Duchess of Kent. Her father, the gentle Duke, died before her first birthday, leaving her alone in a palace filled with politics and strangers. From the day I was born, she would later write, I have known nothing of a father's love. The void he left was quickly filled not with affection, but with control. Her mother, the Duchess of Kent, was German, isolated, and frightened of losing her position. And into that fear stepped a man who would shape the child's early years like a shadow, Sir John Conroy. Conroy was handsome, ambitious, and cunning. He convinced the Duchess that the little princess must be raised under constant supervision, away from the corrupting influence of the royal court. And so he built a tower around her, polished, gilded, and suffocating. It was called the Kensington system. Under this regime, Victoria was never alone. She shared a room with her mother until her teenage years. She could not climb the stairs without a chaperone. Even her meals were tasted before she could eat, as if freedom itself were poison. A visitor once described the palace as half nursery, half prison. The young princess's every movement was observed, her every word corrected, while other children played in parks or learned to ride horses. Victoria learned to write page after page, day after day, pouring her thoughts into paper that no one would ever read. Writing, she said later, was my only true companion. She made hundreds of paper dolls, each one dressed in the costumes of a life she would never live, dancers, travelers, queens of distant lands. They were the friends she was allowed to have. Her real companions were governesses, attendants, and the ever-watchful Conroy, whose voice filled every corner of her childhood. Dr. Jane Ridley, in The Young Victoria, wrote that the Kensington system was designed to produce obedience, but it bred defiance instead. The more Victoria was confined, the more fiercely she longed for escape. She would stare from her window into the gardens where she was rarely permitted to walk, and whisper to her dog, Dash, her only creature of unconditional love, about the world beyond the gates. Her mother thought this system would make her strong. Conroy believed it would make her pliable. Both were wrong. The young girl, who seemed meek and quiet, was secretly taking note of every humiliation, every command, every moment she was denied a voice. In her diaries, written years later, she would recall, "I led a very unhappy life as a child. I had no brothers and sisters, never a father, and was never on intimate or confidential footing with my mother. Yet beneath that unhappiness lay something deeper, a longing she could never quite name. She didn't crave power. Not yet. What she wanted was warmth. She wanted to be loved, not as a symbol, not as a pawn in a dynastic game, but simply as a person. I wish someone would love me for myself," she once wrote in the margin of a childhood letter, a sentence that reads like a plea whispered into the void. The older she grew, the more Conroy's grip tightened. He demanded obedience, calling her my little queen, as if he already owned her destiny. He schemed to have her mother declared regent should King William I die before Victoria turned 18. In his plan, he would rule through them both. But Victoria saw through him. "I despise him," she wrote. "He treats me as a child and commands me as if I were his servant." That defiance, though still caged, was the beginning of something unbreakable. The child who had been taught to bow would one day refuse to kneel. But for now, she endured. The palace's corridors became narrower, the nights longer. The Duchess grew distant, clinging to Conroy's counsel, blind to the resentment brewing in her daughter's heart. Victoria's world was shrinking to ink and shadows. Dr. Helen Rappaport, historian of the Victorian court, observed, "What Conroy and the Duchess never understood was that isolation breeds imagination. In that lonely palace, Victoria learned to live inside her mind, and that mind became her kingdom. She invented a voice no one could silence, a will no one could tame. The little girl, denied affection, began to imagine herself not as a victim, but as something inevitable, someone destined to rise above them all. Still, there were nights when strength gave way to tears, nights when she pressed her face into Dash's fur and whispered secrets the walls could not betray. When she dreamed of freedom, of laughter, of a world where no one watched her breathe. And when she woke, she found only the gray light of dawn slipping through the curtains of her mother's room. In the years that followed, Conroy would attempt to force her hand to make her sign a document granting him power over her future reign. She refused, trembling but unyielding, even as illness and fear pressed her down. From that moment, something inside her changed forever. Love, she realized, could be a weapon in the wrong hands, and obedience could become a chain. By the age of 13, Victoria's eyes had lost their innocence, but gained something sharper resolve. One evening, after her lessons, she stood before the tall mirror in her dimly lit chamber. Candlelight flickered across her reflection, a small girl, pale and tired, but with the bearing of someone far older than her years. She touched the glass as if touching another life, and whispered to herself, almost inaudibly, "Someday, I will be free." June 1837. The bells of Westminster rang in a new dawn. England, weary from old kings and scandals, now had a monarch barely 18 years old, a girl who had lived her whole life behind locked doors. When they came to Kensington to tell her the king was dead, Victoria rose from her bed and said, with trembling calm, "I am ready." That morning, the little girl who once whispered, "Someday I will be free," became queen of the mightiest empire on earth. The courtiers who bowed before her saw a fragile young woman with a soft voice and clear blue eyes. But behind those eyes was a fire born from years of confinement. "I shall be good," she wrote in her journal on the day she became queen. "But I must be my own mistress. Yet freedom can be overwhelming when it arrives too soon. And the palace she had longed to escape became an even larger cage, one made of gold. In that uncertain first year, she met a man who would become her anchor. His name was William Lamb, Lord Melbourne, the Prime Minister of Great Britain. He was 58, twice her age, with silver hair, gentle manners, and the kind of weary charm that made people trust him instantly. To the young queen, he was everything she had never known: calm, kind, attentive, fatherly. Dr. Jane Ridley once wrote, "Lord Melbourne was the first man to teach Victoria that power could be companionable. He began visiting her every day, guiding her through the labyrinth of court politics, teaching her how to read dispatches, how to address Parliament, how to smile without surrender. She is eager to learn," he told a friend, "but her heart learns faster than her mind." They spent hours together, walking in the gardens, reading Shakespeare, laughing at the follies of the aristocracy. He told her stories of his youth, of poetry and heartbreak, of a world she had never touched. Sometimes, when their hands brushed over a page, Victoria would blush and look away. One lady-in-waiting wrote, "It was as though a father and daughter had found in each other what both had long been missing. But there was a tenderness that went beyond propriety." Victoria, in her private diary, did not hide her feelings. "I love him so much, it pains me," she wrote. And again, weeks later, "He is the best friend I have ever had, the kindest, the most affectionate." Her entries glowed with youthful infatuation and something deeper, an aching need for affection, for approval. Lord Melbourne had become her mirror, her moral compass, and her emotional refuge. But there was more than affection between them. There was dependency. She relied on him for everything, from the color of her dress to the wording of her speeches. When ministers displeased her, she looked to him. When courtiers whispered, she sought his reassurance. He, in turn, adored her admiration. In her laughter, he found renewal. In her trust, he rediscovered purpose. Dr. Helen Rappaport noted, "Melbourne became her father, mentor, and suitor all at once, though he was careful never to cross the line. He himself could feel trembling beneath them both. Their bond defied easy labels. It was political, yes, but it was also tender, intimate, and undeniably emotional. In the early mornings, when the world was still asleep, he would sit beside her at the window of Buckingham Palace, explaining the subtleties of government. She listened intently, her chin resting on her hands like a child hearing bedtime tales. "You must trust no one too quickly," he said, "but never forget that kindness is also power." She smiled, replying softly, "You make me wish to be both." The Queen's affection for Melbourne did not go unnoticed. Courtiers murmured that she hung upon his every word. Political rivals saw weakness in her devotion. Yet Melbourne never exploited her. He understood the fragility beneath her crown. "She is alone," he told a colleague, and that loneliness would break most men. As the months passed, his influence grew, and so did the public's unease. Some called him the Queen's favorite. Others whispered cruelly that she was besotted with her prime minister. But in truth, their relationship was built on something purer and sadder. Victoria had lost her father before she could remember him, had been betrayed by every man who claimed to guide her. For the first time, she had found a man who neither feared nor used her. In her diary, she confessed, "I always feel so safe when he is near, and so lost when he is away." It was not the voice of a ruler. It was the voice of a daughter who had finally found a protector. The line between duty and desire blurred with every passing day. When Melbourne smiled, she forgot she was queen. When he left the room, she felt the ache of absence. There was one entry, written after a long evening of conversation, where she described how he made her laugh until tears rolled down her face. "He told me the most ridiculous tale," she wrote, "and when I laughed, he looked so pleased that my heart quite fluttered." The young queen, who had spent her childhood in silence, had at last discovered the joy of being seen. But politics has no patience for sentiment. In 1839, a government crisis forced Lord Melbourne to resign. When he came to tell her, she refused to believe it. "No, no, you cannot leave me," she cried. "What shall I do without you?" He bowed deeply, his voice thick with feeling. "You will do, ma'am, as you always have splendidly." That night, her diary recorded her heartbreak in a single line. "It feels as though he has died." His departure marked the first great loss of her reign, not of a husband, not of a father, but of the one man who made her feel safe in her own skin. She would see him again, briefly, when political tides brought him back to office for a short while, but their closeness was never the same. Time and duty intervened. Yet the imprint he left was indelible. Melbourne taught her not only how to rule, but how to feel. He awakened in her both tenderness and need, the need to be guided, to be loved, to be told she was right. And that need would follow her through every relationship that came after Albert. John Brown, Abdul Karim. Each man would in some way echo Melbourne's voice. Dr. Lucy Worsley, in her study of Victoria's letters, concluded, Melbourne was the mold in which her heart was cast. Every man she loved thereafter was, in truth, a reflection of him. As years went on, Victoria would remember him not as a politician, but as a comfort she could never replace. He was my everything, she once said quietly to a lady-in-waiting. My guide, my friend, my first sorrow. And so, in those early years of her reign, before the Grand Empire, before the endless morning, there existed a fleeting season of warmth when the little queen found, for the first time, that love and power could share the same room. It was the beginning of a pattern that would shape her entire life, the search for safety in the arms of a man who made her forget the loneliness of the crown. It was October of 1839 when destiny arrived at the doors of Buckingham Palace dressed in a dark uniform, carrying the quiet confidence of a man who already knew what fate had written for him. Prince Albert of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha, Victoria's cousin from Germany, had come to London at the suggestion of their mutual uncle, King Leopold of the Belgians. It was not their first meeting. They had met once before when Victoria was 17, but this time, something was different. She was queen now, and he was no longer a boy. Victoria's diary from that day trembles with excitement. He is so handsome, so delightful, she wrote. Such beautiful blue eyes, such a perfect form. It was the language not of a monarch, but of a young woman overwhelmed by desire. She spent the entire evening stealing glances at him, at the sharp line of his jaw, the graceful tilt of his shoulders, the kindness in his gaze. By the next morning, she could no longer contain herself. In a move that defied every royal tradition, the Queen of England summoned Albert to her chamber and proposed to him herself. It would make me very happy if you would consent to marry me, she said softly. He accepted. And with that, the most famous love story of the Victorian age began not with a crown, but with a blush. Their wedding took place on a cold February morning in 1840. Victoria, radiant in white satin and orange blossoms, refused to wear a crown. Instead, she wore a simple wreath, an image of purity and devotion that would define bridal fashion for the next century. As the church bells pealed, crowds cheered through the fog, and the young queen wept openly. I never spent such an evening, she wrote later that night, her words breathless with joy. My dearest, dear Albert. His great love and affection gave me feelings of heavenly love and happiness I never could have hoped to feel before. Those first months were a revelation. She called him my angel, my darling one, my own blessed Albert. They rode together through Windsor Park, sang duets at the piano, and danced until midnight. When she wrote to her Uncle Leopold, her words spilled with ecstasy. I am the happiest of beings. There cannot be a happier creature than I am. The young queen, who had grown up in solitude, finally felt seen, touched, and understood. For the first time, her heart belonged entirely to someone else. But love, when it burns too brightly, casts long shadows. Albert was gentle, but he was also exacting. Raised in the disciplined courts of Germany, he believed order was the soul of good government and of marriage. He was intellectual, methodical, and proud. To Victoria's passion, he brought reason. To her spontaneity, restraint. He is perfection itself, she wrote, so unselfish, so full of goodness, and I, so foolish. Those words, meant as admiration, would soon sound more like surrender. Albert's influence crept into every corner of her life. He began attending her meetings with ministers, editing her letters, advising on matters of state. He reorganized her household, her schedule, even her correspondence. The Queen's handwriting must not be so rapid, he once told a secretary. It conveys emotion, not thought. What began as partnership slowly became tutelage. The young queen, who once declared, "I must be my own mistress," found herself bending to her husband's will. Historians have long debated the balance of their relationship. Dr. Lucy Worsley observed, Victoria loved Albert as a woman, but obeyed him as a subject. It was as though she had traded the chains of John Conroy for the velvet manacles of the man she adored. Yet she never rebelled. Her love for him was absolute, all-consuming a religion. When they argued, she was the one who wept. begging forgiveness, even when she had done nothing wrong. "I am so hasty, so unreasonable," she would write, and he, so patient. In truth, Albert's patience was control in disguise. Still, there were moments of tenderness that belonged only to them. She adored watching him play with their children, first little Vicky, then Bertie, Alice, and the rest who followed. She called them our treasures. He would lift them high into the air, laughing, while she looked on with tears in her eyes. The palace, once cold and silent, was filled with music and light. Albert played the organ. Victoria painted watercolors. Their evenings glowed with warmth. It seemed, for a time, that love had conquered every wound from her childhood. But marriage, even royal marriage, is no fairy tale. With every pregnancy, 9 in total, Victoria felt her body and her freedom slipping away. "Being pregnant," she wrote bitterly, "is more like being a cow than a queen." Each confinement left her more dependent on Albert. He, in turn, grew increasingly distant, absorbed in his duties and moral projects. "He is so gone," she confessed once. "So much the philosopher, and so little the lover." Albert saw himself not as her consort, but as her reformer. He wanted to refine her temper, her habits, even her thoughts. "You must learn to master your emotions," he would tell her. "A sovereign must be calm." She tried God, how she tried. But passion was her nature. "He is too perfect," she lamented. "I can never reach him." Their clashes were legendary. Victoria's temper flared quickly. Albert met it with silence. Once, after a quarrel, he locked himself in his study, and she spent the night pacing outside his door, crying. "He will not speak to me," she wrote. "It kills me when he is angry." Yet by morning, she would beg for reconciliation. Her diaries show an endless cycle of adoration and apology, of love bruised but never broken. Dr. Helen Rappaport called it a marriage of opposites, her storm to his stillness. It was precisely that tension that bound them. Albert needed her vitality. She needed his discipline. Together, they became a symbol of moral order for the nation, the ideal family, in an age obsessed with virtue. But behind the portraits, behind the perfect image of domestic bliss, lay a truth far more human. Albert's sense of duty was relentless. He worked tirelessly on social reforms, education, and the arts, but it came at a cost. He was often ill, exhausted by the burden of being both husband and unofficial king. He tries to do everything, Victoria wrote, and I fear it will destroy him. Her words would prove prophetic. By the late 1850s, Albert's health was failing. He suffered from constant pain, fever, and fatigue, though he hid it from her. When news reached him that their son, Bertie, had been involved in a scandal at Cambridge, he insisted on confronting the boy personally. Despite the bitter December rain, he traveled north to discipline his son. Within days, he collapsed with what was likely typhoid fever. Victoria never left his side. In the quiet of Windsor Castle, she watched helplessly as the man who had been her guide, her lover, her conscience, slipped away. On December 14th, 1861, he whispered his final words, "It is all over now," and was gone. The clock in his room was stopped at the exact moment of his death. In her diary that night, she wrote only this: "My life as a happy woman is ended. The world is gone for me." She was 42 years old. The empire still stood. The throne was still hers, but her soul was shattered. She ordered the palace draped in black, his rooms left untouched, his clothes laid out each morning as if he might return. She spoke to his portrait, slept beside his dressing gown, and signed her letters, "The Broken-Hearted Widow." Dr. Jane Ridley once remarked, "Victoria did not simply mourn Albert, she deified him. In death, he became the god she could never question." It was true. The same passion that once gave her joy now chained her to grief. Albert's perfection, once oppressive, became sacred. She rewrote their history, erasing the quarrels, the frustrations, the human flaws. What remained was an idol, an angel who had ruled her heart and now ruled her memory. Her children, her ministers, her country all receded behind the veil of mourning. For 40 years, she would dress in black. For 40 years, she would call herself the Widow of Windsor. The love that had once liberated her had consumed her entirely. And yet, in the stillness of those long nights, surrounded by silence and candlelight, she would open her old journals, run her fingers over the words written in another lifetime, and whisper to herself, "He is so perfect, so unselfish, and I so foolish." That was the paradox of Queen Victoria, the woman who could command armies, but could not command her own heart. Her greatest love had been her greatest prison. For all her power, she remained what she had always been, a child still waiting to be loved. The year was 1861, and the rain would not stop falling. December wrapped Windsor Castle in a blanket of gray, and the corridors echoed with the hollow sound of footsteps that no longer led anywhere. In a quiet room, draped in velvet, the clock had been stopped at 10:50. Its hands, like hers, refused to move forward. Prince Albert was gone, and with him, the light of her world. Victoria sat beside his bed for hours after he died, unable to look away from his still face. "He is cold. He is gone," she whispered, her voice cracking like the edge of broken glass. That night, she opened her diary and wrote the sentence that would define the rest of her life. "My life as a happy woman is ended. The world is gone for me." Those words were not just grief. They were a declaration of death in life. From that moment on, Queen Victoria began to bury herself along with her husband. In the days that followed, she ordered the castle draped in black. Curtains were drawn, mirrors covered, and even the clocks were muted. The grand rooms that had once echoed with children's laughter and Albert's voice now became a mausoleum. Every morning, she commanded that his clothes be laid out as if he might still return. His shaving set remained on the dressing table, his chair at dinner untouched. Servants were forbidden to disturb the items in his study. In every way that mattered, time had stopped at Windsor. She dressed entirely in mourning-heavy black crepe that would never again be replaced by color. To see her, wrote one lady-in-waiting, was to feel the weight of sorrow itself made flesh. Her face paled, her eyes sank into shadow. She moved through her days like a ghost of the throne she once embodied. Ministers begged her to return to public life, but she refused. "I am not fit to be seen," she told them. "I am half alive and half in the grave." For the people of Britain, the Queen's withdrawal was bewildering. A monarch who once symbolized stability and virtue had vanished from view. Rumors spread. Some said she had gone mad. Others whispered that she was haunted by Albert's spirit. Satirical pamphlets began calling her the Widow of Windsor, mocking her seclusion. Yet those who knew her best saw something else, a woman clinging to love as the only proof that her life had ever been real. Dr. Jane Ridley once wrote, "Victoria's mourning was an act of devotion. but also of rebellion. In worshiping Albert, she kept him alive and kept her own heart from collapsing completely. She had lost not only a husband, but her compass, her confidant, her second self. Every decision, every breath she had once measured against his approval was now suspended in doubt. Without him, she no longer trusted herself to rule, to smile, even to live. But grief has strange alchemy. What first feels like death can, over time, become transformation. In those long, silent months, Victoria began to read his letters, dozens of them, written during their 21 years together. She traced his handwriting with her fingers, whispering the words aloud. "Be good, my child," one letter said, "and remember your calling." Those simple words pierced her isolation. Slowly, she began to write again, not decrees or correspondence, but confessions. The act of writing, the old solace from her childhood, became her salvation once more. In her journals, the tone began to shift. Beneath the mourning and guilt, something new stirred a faint pulse of self-awareness. For the first time, she began to see how much of her life had been defined by Albert's will. He had guided her, shaped her, and shadowed her. In his absence, she confronted an uncomfortable truth. She did not know who she was without him. "I am helpless," she wrote. "He was my reason, my voice, my strength. Now I must learn to stand alone." Historians like Dr. Helen Rappaport have called this period Victoria's descent into darkness, but also the beginning of her rebirth. Her mourning, while extreme, was also a kind of rebellion against a world that expected widows to grieve quietly and move on. She refused to let time or tradition dictate the depth of her love. If Albert had been her son, she would live in his shadow forever. But as the years passed, the shadow began to change. Her solitude turned inward, and with it came a new kind of clarity. She started to correspond with her ministers, again hesitant at first, then with growing authority. She began to see that she could govern without Albert's hand guiding her. The letters grew sharper, more confident. The Queen knows her mind. One minister wrote, "She no longer seeks approval, only action. Still, she clung to his presence each anniversary of his death. She lit candles and spoke to his portrait as if he were still alive. You are near me," she would murmur, "though I cannot see you. The sound of rain against the windows of Windsor became her lullaby. The tolling of church bells, her only company. Yet, amid that loneliness, a strange peace began to emerge. Dr. Lucy Worsley observed, Albert's death freed Victoria in ways she could never have imagined. It forced her to rely on her own instincts, and those instincts would soon make her the most formidable monarch of her age. It was as though grief had stripped her of illusions and left only the raw truth of her will beneath the widow's veil. A new woman was forming, one who no longer needed to be loved to believe in her own strength. Still, the world saw only the black-clad figure who refused to smile. Pain became her armor. Mourning became her identity. It is better to suffer, she once said, than to forget. But in her suffering, she found a strange kind of power, the power of memory, of endurance, of a heart that refused to die. By the end of the 1860s, whispers of madness had faded into reverence. The public began to see her not as broken, but as steadfast a woman who embodied the endurance of a nation. The widow of Windsor had become a symbol not of loss, but of loyalty. And yet, within those darkened halls, she remained the same woman who had once knelt beside her husband's bed, whispering, "Do not leave me." Decades later, she would still write his name each morning, still keep his photograph beside her pillow, still believe he watched her from beyond the veil. But somewhere deep inside, beneath the layers of grief and ritual, she had begun to live again. She would never say it aloud, but the truth was there, hidden between the lines of her diary. Love had not died with Albert. It had changed shape, become something quieter, stronger, more enduring. It was no longer a chain, but a memory, and through that memory, she was learning slowly, painfully, to walk in the world once more. The Scottish Highlands had always been Victoria's refuge. After Albert's death, she fled there whenever the weight of Windsor grew too heavy to bear. Balmoral Castle, her granite sanctuary, rose among rolling hills and moors where mist clung to the heather and the air carried the scent of rain and pine. It was here, amid the wild beauty of Scotland, that her frozen heart began, slowly, to thaw. One autumn morning in 1864, as she rode along the edge of the River Dee, she met a man who would change everything. His name was John Brown, a Highlander born and bred, broad-shouldered, sunburned, with a voice like gravel and eyes the color of storm clouds. He had served Albert as a ghillie, a kind of outdoor attendant, and when Victoria came north to escape her sorrow, he was assigned to her service. He was nothing like the courtiers of London, blunt, unpolished, fiercely loyal, and entirely unafraid of the woman who ruled an empire. From the start, he broke every rule of royal etiquette. When she first appeared in her heavy mourning dress, Brown simply nodded and said, "Ye'll catch cold, woman, if ye dinna throw a shawl about your shoulders. Woman, not your majesty, not ma'am." To her astonishment, she didn't scold him. She laughed, truly laughed for the first time in years. Dr. Helen Rappaport described that moment as a spark of life returning to the Queen's soul. Brown treated her not as a relic of power or a saint of sorrow, but as a person, a weary widow who still needed warmth and wit. In his presence, she rediscovered the simple, forgotten pleasure of being ordinary. They rode side by side through the heather, hunted deer in the crisp air, and drank whiskey by the fire, laughing at the absurdity of courtly manners. He teased her when she was stubborn. She scolded him when he swore. Their conversations, filled with humor and affection, became her medicine. "He is devoted to me," she wrote in one of her letters, so unlike an ordinary servant. In another, she called him "my dear Brown." Soon, he was everywhere, her constant companion on walks, her guard on horseback, her shadow at every journey. She even had a special bell installed in Balmoral to summon him instantly. When her ministers objected, she brushed them aside. "Mr. Brown," she said firmly, "is worth 100 courtiers to the outside world." Their closeness was scandalous. The newspapers mocked him as the Queen's stallion. Caricatures appeared showing her perched side saddle, while Brown held her reins with an almost affectionate grip. Ministers whispered about improper familiarity. Members of the royal household complained that he was insolent, coarse, and overbearing. But none of it mattered to her. "He cares for me as a human being," she said, "not as a queen." For the first time since Albert's death, she was seen smiling again. Witnesses recalled her laughing so loudly during one of Brown's jokes that a startled horse nearly threw her off. Her Majesty's laughter, wrote a courtier, was as bright as the Highland sun after years of fog. But there was more than humor between them. Beneath their easy companionship pulsed something unspoken, something that frightened and thrilled her in equal measure. late at night. They sat by the fire reading poetry or listening to the wind rattle the windows. Sometimes he would tell her stories of his childhood, of fishing in icy rivers, of his mother's songs in Gaelic, and she would listen with tears in her eyes. He reminded her of the earth itself raw, honest, alive. Was it love? Historians have argued for decades. Dr. Jane Ridley called it a love without touch, a devotion of souls rather than bodies. Others hinted that the bond ran deeper, citing letters burned by her family after her death. But whatever its form, there was no denying its depth. Brown became the one person she trusted completely. When assassins attempted to approach her carriage in 1872, it was Brown who threw himself between her and danger. He saved my life. She told Parliament, "He is the truest of men." Yet for all his courage, Brown's presence stirred unease across the empire. The aristocracy could not accept that their queen, still in mourning black, spent her days with a rough Highland servant. "It is unseemly," they said. "It is indecent." Even her own children bristled. The Prince of Wales despised him, calling him that brute. But Victoria refused to yield. "If the world dislikes my Brown," she wrote defiantly, "it is the world that is wrong." In truth, Brown gave her more than companionship. He gave her back herself. He coaxed her out of her self-imposed tomb, made her walk, laugh, breathe. He taught her again the joy of rain on her face, the pleasure of mud on her boots. With him, she was not the widow of Windsor. She was simply a woman in the wild, unguarded and alive. "He has restored my health and my spirits," she told her doctor. "He has been my best comforter." Their relationship lasted over 2 decades. When she traveled to Balmoral, she insisted on sharing the same household rhythms as Brown early rides: plain food, evenings by the fire. Sometimes he spoke too boldly, even chastising her for her temper. "You are too hard on them, woman," he would say when she snapped at servants. To everyone's shock, she would laugh instead of scolding him. He was the only person alive who could talk to her that way. Dr. Lucy Worsley remarked, "In Brown, Victoria found the courage to live again, but she also found the courage to be defied. He gave her something Albert never could: equality. Where Albert had sought to perfect her, Brown accepted her flaws. Where Albert commanded, Brown teased. It was not the love of marble ideals, but of flesh and humor and imperfection. Inevitably, time began to take him too. By the late 1870s, Brown's health was failing. Years of outdoor labor and whiskey had worn down his body. When he fell ill with pneumonia in 1883, she nursed him as tenderly as she had once nursed Albert. "He is very, very ill," she wrote. "I cannot bear to lose him." On March 27th, he died quietly at Balmoral. His last words, according to a servant, were, "God bless her." Victoria was inconsolable. "The blow has been terrible," she wrote in her journal. "He was the best, truest heart that ever lived." She ordered a statue erected at Balmoral in his honor and kept a lock of his hair in a locket beside her heart. When her family protested, she refused to listen. "You cannot understand," she said. "He was my dearest friend." The court tried to erase all trace of him after her death, burning letters, removing portraits, but they could not erase what he had awakened in her. Beneath the legend of the grieving widow, beneath the iron crown of the empire, was a woman who had rediscovered laughter and the courage to love again, even if that love dared not speak its name. Dr. Elizabeth Longford once summarized it perfectly. John Brown gave Victoria what Albert never did, the freedom to be human. And that freedom, once tasted, would never leave her. For the rest of her life, she carried his memory like a talisman on her writing desk, beside the portraits of her children and the bust of Albert, stood a small photograph of a rugged Highlander in plain clothes, the man who had dared to call her woman. And sometimes, when the mist rolled down the hills and the pipes played in the distance, she would smile faintly and whisper to the empty room, "My dear Brown." The summer of 1887 shimmered with celebration. Across Britain, bells rang and banners waved to mark the golden jubilee of Queen Victoria, 50 years upon the throne. But amid the pomp and glitter of empire, the aging queen felt the weight of solitude more than ever. She was 68. Her joints ached, her eyesight dimmed, and though millions called her Empress of India, she had never once set foot on its soil. She longed for warmth, not of the hearth, but of the heart. And so, from that distant jewel of her empire, came the man who would be her final companion, a young Indian clerk named Abdul Karim. He was 24, tall and handsome, with dark eyes and a quiet grace, chosen merely to present a ceremonial coin to the queen at her jubilee. Abdul caught her attention immediately. "A fine young man," she noted in her diary, "with a noble countenance and gentle manner." What began as curiosity soon became fascination. Within days, she asked that he remain in her household. Within weeks, she invited him to dine at her table, a privilege unheard of for a servant, let alone an Indian in Victorian England. Abdul Karim became her munshi, her teacher and spiritual confidant. He taught her words in Hindustani and Urdu, patiently guiding her through the elegant curves of the script. "How pretty the letters look," she wrote. "I feel like a child learning to speak again." To him, she was not a distant monarch, but the motherly lady, eager and unpretentious. To her, he was not a servant, but a door to another world, a world of color, music, fragrance, and faith. They spent hours together in her study at Osborne House. He read to her from the Quran, told her stories of Agra and the great Mughal emperors, and spoke of the jasmine-scented evenings by the Yamuna River. The queen listened in rapture, her imagination carried far beyond the gray skies of England. "He speaks so beautifully," she wrote, "of things I have never seen, of skies that never rain." She began signing her notes to him with the affectionate title, "Your loving motherly friend." The court was scandalized. Her family was furious. Her private secretary, Sir Henry Ponsonby, wrote in exasperation, "The Munshi is becoming far too familiar. He dictates to Her Majesty as though he were a prince." The royal household seethed with gossip. They whispered that he was manipulating her, that he sought power, that he performed dark Indian rituals in her presence. But the queen, stubborn as ever, would not listen. Prejudice. She called it shameful English prejudice. Dr. Jane Ridley later wrote, "Victoria's affection for Abdul Karim was as much rebellion as sentiment. In him, she found both tenderness and defiance, a way to defy the rigid world that had caged her for so long. She had spent her life under the gaze of men who judged, measured, and controlled her. With Abdul, for the first time in decades, she could simply exist. He is all I need," she wrote. "Such comfort to my soul." The two of them walked daily in the gardens at Osborne. He read poetry. She repeated verses after him, her accent soft and musical. He called her Urani, a name from the stars, and she laughed like a girl. Sometimes he would cook Indian dishes for her, spiced lentils, curries, chutneys, and she delighted in them, calling them most refreshing. The kitchens at Osborne began to smell of cinnamon and cardamom, much to the horror of her British staff. What began as curiosity deepened into genuine affection. She promoted Abdul, granted him land in India, and even had him photographed beside her, seated a breach of royal protocol that stunned the empire. The newspapers fumed, the Queen and her Indian favorite. Her own children begged her to dismiss him. "He makes us all a laughingstock," wrote her son, Bertie, the Prince of Wales. "You are blind to his ambitions." But Victoria's answer was simple. "I am old," she said, "and I will be happy in my own way." She refused to bow to convention. She ignored the whispers, the sneers, the insults. For the first time since Albert's death, she was not ruled by duty or grief, but by the simple pleasure of human connection. "He is kind to me," she told her doctor, "and that is all I ask." Dr. Helen Rappaport observed, "Abdul Karim represented to Victoria what John Brown once had truth unvarnished, but he added to it the mystery of the East. He offered her something England could not warmth without constraint, faith without doctrine, respect without reverence. Their friendship became a kind of spiritual exchange. She asked him to translate Indian proverbs for her, and she began writing them in her diary. "God has made all nations of one blood," she copied one day in Urdu. It was both a lesson and a statement, but the court's resentment grew poisonous. Letters were intercepted. Servants refused to bow to him. Ministers complained that he had access to confidential papers. The Prince of Wales threatened to have him expelled. Still, Victoria protected him fiercely. "They are all jealous," she wrote. "They cannot understand that affection knows no color." In 1897, during her Diamond Jubilee, she insisted Abdul ride with her in the royal carriage, an honor reserved for nobles. The crowds cheered the Queen, but courtiers seethed in silence. To them, it was humiliation. To her, liberation. 50 years a queen, she said that evening. And now, at last, I am my own mistress. Her health declined after 1899. Rheumatism, failing eyesight, and the relentless passage of time left her frail. Yet Abdul remained close, attending to her letters, reading aloud when her eyes grew tired. Sometimes, when she drifted in and out of sleep, he would hum soft Indian melodies, and she would murmur, it soothes me. In her final Christmas journal, she wrote one last note about him. My dear good Munshi, so faithful, so gentle. God bless him always. When she died at Osborne House on January 22nd, 1901, Abdul was not allowed to see her body. Her family, furious at his influence, ordered his belongings seized and his letters burned. The new king, Edward VII, expelled him from the royal household and shipped him back to India in disgrace. But even that could not erase what had been written in her heart. Among her private possessions, hidden in a small box, were several items placed there by her own instruction. A photograph of Albert, a lock of John Brown's hair, and a handwritten note to Abdul Karim. It read simply, Your loving friend, Victoria R. I. Dr. Lucy Worsley would later write. The story of Abdul Karim was not a scandal, it was her confession. After a lifetime spent obeying, grieving, and pretending, Victoria finally allowed herself to feel. In him, she had found the courage to be unguarded again, to defy the empire that bore her name, and to admit that love, whether maternal, spiritual, or something between, was her final rebellion. In her last years, she no longer feared judgment. The woman who had once lived in the shadow of Albert, who had hidden behind mourning veils and marble portraits, now spoke freely, laughed easily, and wrote without hesitation. Through Abdul, she touched a freedom she had never known, the freedom to exist without apology. And perhaps that is why, when her funeral cortege passed through the streets of London, draped in white instead of black, there was a hint of light in the mourning crowd. The queen who had ruled through restraint left this world having learned her last lesson not from kings or ministers, but from a young man from Agra who reminded her that the soul, like the heart, knows no rank. In the final years of her life, the great Queen of England no longer resembled the figure who had once ruled half the world. Her back was bent, her eyes dimmed beneath the weight of years. And yet, each morning, she still reached for her pen. The diaries, 60 years of them, lay stacked beside her bed like the walls of a paper kingdom. She had written nearly every day of her life, recording not just history, but the rhythm of her own heart. In shaky handwriting, she wrote of weather, of her children, of small joys and memories that refused to fade. The ink had grown faint, but the voice within it still trembled with life. at Osborne House on the Isle of Wight, her refuge by the sea. She lived surrounded by the ghosts of those she had loved. Albert's portraits watched her from the walls. John Brown's photograph stood quietly by her writing desk, and from a drawer she sometimes drew a letter from Abdul Karim, still folded with care. In those late afternoons, when the light turned golden through lace curtains, she would pause her writing, close her eyes, and listen to the waves brushing the shore. "I have been loved," she whispered once to her youngest daughter, "and I have loved in return. What else is there?" It was not a boast. It was an epitaph. Dr. Lucy Worsley wrote, "Victoria's greatest gift to history was her honesty of emotion. She made it permissible for a monarch to be human." Behind the public image of moral rigidity, the paragon of Victorian virtue was a woman who had spent her life breaking every rule that bore her name. She ruled an empire that preached restraint, yet her own heart had been ruled by feeling. She wept openly, laughed too loudly, quarreled fiercely, and loved without shame. As the century drew to a close, her world was changing faster than even she could comprehend. The Industrial Revolution she had once celebrated now darkened skies with smoke. The empire she had expanded was showing cracks of dissent. Her grandchildren sat upon the thrones of Europe, Germany, Russia, Spain, but the peace she had woven through bloodlines was already fraying. Yet amid all the noise of politics and progress, she seemed content to fade quietly, surrounded by her journals, her memories, and her ghosts. Historians have long argued about the contradictions of her character. Dr. Jane Ridley once said, "She was the most powerful woman in the world, and yet she spent her life yearning to be ordinary." That contradiction was her truth. For all her power, she had never stopped seeking connection. Albert gave her purpose. Brown gave her laughter. Abdul gave her peace. Each of them, in their own way, freed her from something the expectations of empire, the weight of duty, the fear of loneliness. When illness came for her in the winter of 1901, she faced it without fear. On January 22nd, as the lamps burned low in Osborne, she drifted in and out of sleep. Her family gathered around her, the future kings and queens of Europe standing in reverent silence. But her thoughts were elsewhere. She murmured the names of those who had gone before Albert. Brown, my dear Munshi, and smiled faintly. At 6:30 in the evening, the great queen breathed her last. The reign of 63 years, the longest in British history, until her great-great-granddaughter, Elizabeth II, was over, when her body was prepared for burial. Her final instructions astonished even those who had served her all their lives. Beneath the royal regalia, inside the coffin of the Empress of India, they found hidden keepsakes placed by her own hand: a lock of Albert's hair, his dressing gown, and a small photograph of him as a young man. In her left hand, she held the wedding ring given to her by Prince Albert. In her right, concealed beneath flowers, was a ring once belonging to John Brown's mother, a ring Brown had given her years before, a secret she had guarded even in death. Dr. Helen Rappaport described this act as the perfect summation of her life, a woman who obeyed no one's idea of propriety but her own, even in the grave. Victoria chose her companions, uniting her two great loves, one sanctified by the church, the other by the heart. For all the pomp and ceremony that surrounded her passing, it was an act of private defiance that defined her legacy. On the day of her funeral, London fell silent. Muffled drums beat through the mist as her white-draped coffin was carried through the crowds. White, not black, for she had ordered that her final journey should be one of peace, not mourning. Soldiers bowed their heads. Children climbed lampposts, and old veterans saluted the Queen, who had outlived them all. As her carriage passed, a shaft of sunlight broke through the clouds and fell upon the coffin. One observer wrote, "It was as though the heavens themselves bade her farewell." In that moment, it was not the ruler the world mourned. It was the woman, the little girl, who had once whispered, "Someday, I will be free." The young queen who had loved too deeply. The widow who had lived half her life in shadow. The sovereign who had defied the very image her own age had built around her. She had been daughter, wife, mother, lover, widow, friend, and empress. But above all, she had been human. Perhaps that is why her story endures, not as a tale of crowns and empires, but of endurance, tenderness, and defiance. She proved that vulnerability is not weakness, and that love, messy, imperfect, uncontained, can coexist with power. The woman who gave her name to a century of restraint had, in truth, spent her life chasing freedom through the people she loved. Dr. Elizabeth Longford once wrote, She began as a child, imprisoned by others' expectations, and ended as a woman, liberated by her own heart. That, perhaps, was the secret the crown could never hide. Beneath the jewels and velvet, beneath the iron will of empire, was a heart that refused to stop feeling. As the screen fades, we return to her writing desk, the same one that bore her diaries for more than 6 decades. A single candle flickers beside the open journal. The pages are empty now, the pen resting quietly across them. In the background, a faint melody of piano drifts like the echo of time. Then, slowly, we hear the sound of a quill scratching paper one last time, and in that soft, eternal rhythm, her spirit lingers, the sound of a woman writing her way into history. The words appear upon the screen, glowing against the dark. Perhaps that's her greatest legacy, that to be truly human, one must dare to love beyond rules. Fade out. The music swells, tender and timeless. The final title glows across the black, the hidden passions of Queen Victoria, a woman unveiled.